Hello friends, we are here in Romans chapter 11 today, and this is an interesting chapter. I suppose they're all interesting chapters, but I was listening to a sermon about this chapter from a Messianic Jew, and he was saying that he was kind of a speaker. He would go around and he had different messages that he would give on different chapters of the New Testament. And he said, but it was basically 4 different messages that he would give, and he would always come back to Romans chapter 11. That was one of his major chapters. And so for years he was just giving the same, I guess, kind of like a gospel message, but to Jewish people. And he would always include this chapter. This was the most important. And he said that when it came to his daily devotionals, he would every once in a while come back to this chapter. And he'd be like, oh, it's Romans chapter 11. I've been teaching this for years. You know, I should probably just glaze over it. But then he would read it and he would be like, this passage is just so fascinating. For years he could teach this. And he says every time he would say he would read it, he would say, it's just so interesting and it's so mysterious. So basically it starts off with Paul saying, you know, does all of this, you know, in light of, you know, the previous chapters, he says, does this mean that God has turned his back on the Israelites? And he gives the same answer that he continues to give from these questions that he's posing to himself in this letter. He says, by no means. God has absolutely not rejected the Jewish people. And he says, you know, I myself am an Israelite. I'm not rejected by God. But he's saying more than that. You know, of course there are Jews that have accepted Christ, but he's saying it's more than that. It should be stated again that this was a letter to the Christian church in Rome, which was still primarily Jews. So this letter that was given, it was probably given to people that used to be part of the synagogue in the area. But there were also Gentiles. And so in this chapter, he's speaking to the Jews, and then at some point he goes, now I want to speak to the Gentiles. And so there's both of them in there, but they're all Christians. Now, something else needs to be said, that the people that were persecuting the Christians were primarily Jews that were not Christians. He talks about the suffering that they're going through. And we know from the book of Acts that, you know, at some point all the Christians were thrown out of Rome. And so he could be talking about that. But we know that nobody else would have incentive for kicking out the Christians more than the Jews, because the Jews were, you know, it's kind of eroding away the Jewish people there, because so many of them are turning to Christianity. But most of them stay into Judaism. Anyway, so Paul is speaking to the Jews here, and he's saying, you know, like he said in the previous chapter, you know, there was this stumbling block, but the stumbling does not lead to them completely falling. And he mentions there's this part in, if you've ever read the book of 1 Kings, there's a part where Elijah, and he hits a low point where he's just like at this mountain and he's waiting for God to speak, and God speaks to him, and he's like, look, I've spoken very zealous for you. And he's like, as far as I know, I'm the only one left. Out of all your people, I'm the only one left. And God says to Elijah, he says, there's a remnant. He said, not all the Jews have turned their back on me. He says, I've kept a remnant for myself. You know, some people that have not bowed down to Baal. And, you know, what he's talking about is people who have kept the faith. People that are faithful to God. And not that they have done all of the things, but that they still have faith. So he's saying, I've kept this remnant for myself. And what Paul is saying here is that in the same way that God kept a remnant for himself then, he is keeping a remnant now. And he's going to keep it until the fullness of all the Gentiles have been brought in. So he starts speaking to the Gentiles then. And he's saying, now I want you to know, he talks a lot about grafting. I don't know if you're watching this, I don't know if you know what grafting is, but I was listening to a story not too long ago on the radio, and they were talking about how in inner city places where they will, basically what you do is you cut off a branch of a tree and then you put in a branch of a different tree. And so what they're doing is they might find like a big oak tree that's right in the middle of the city, and they want people to be able to have fresh food. And so they'll find an apple tree or an orange tree. They'll cut off a branch of like an oak tree and they'll put on an orange tree, and you can actually grow oranges from this oak tree if you have that branch. You can do that. You can put different branches of a tree on a different tree, and if you put it together right, you can grow different things from it. And he's saying that's what that's what God has done. The branches that were there were this olive tree, and the olive tree with the branches are the Jews. But God is the root. God's the trunk. And he's saying what he's doing is because the Jewish people were unfaithful, God has grafted in these other branches because these other branches are useful to him. So we are useful to God, we are faithful to God, and so he's grafted us onto his tree. And so now we're a part of it. But he's saying to us, the Gentiles, don't think that this means that you are the tree. And I think there's a lot of people that believe that today. They believe in what's called replacement theology. They believe that there were Jews and they were God's people, and now because we are now the sons of Abraham through faith, that they are now not the sons of Abraham. And Paul is specifically saying against that, no, because how much easier would it be for God to graft in his original branches? And that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying God can bring in these, the Jews, and it would make more sense because they have the background. It was their Messiah that we are now part of. So we, as Gentile, I'm assuming most people that are watching this are Gentile believers. He's saying we are basically adopted in, but the Jewish people were the original people. So we can't be, it's really speaking out against Christian anti-Semitism. We need to love Jews. We need to really care for them. And it says something here that I think is so interesting. He says part of the reason that God has hardened them and brought us in is because he wants to make them jealous. He wants the Jewish people to see the relationship that the Christians have with God, and he wants them to be jealous for it so that they might be able to be brought back in. And he hints at something that is to come. Someday I believe, around the time of Jesus coming, it doesn't say that specifically here, but there's going to be a bunch of Jews that willingly accept Jesus as Messiah. And it's going to be so natural, and it's going to be so glorious to see all of them coming right back exactly where they need to be in a good relationship with God, who is their Messiah. So I personally really long for that day. You know, I long for the day that the Jewish people, you know, the Israelites, will not be hardened, but they will receive the Messiah, and that they'll be saved by him. And so it's saying clearly here that God still has a covenant with them, that his promises to them they're still there. So that's the point of this passage. So if there's anything I would hope that people would take away from this passage, it is that you know, you should really love the Jewish people, and you should really make sure that your salvation doesn't fall away. You know, that you know, when he's talking about how easy it would be for us to be cut back off, you know, we need to make sure that doesn't happen to us, because it can and it will. And that's exactly what it's saying in this passage. It's saying that we could be cut off. And so when it speaks about election here, you know, I'm not speaking about election in every chapter. He's saying, as for election, you know, the Jews are blessed. And what he's talking about is corporate election, like a people election. And so he's saying the Jews are blessed as far as election, because someday there's going to be a day where the Jewish people are going to be brought back in. So us as American Gentiles, you know, we have been blessed also, but we need to make sure that we are faithful to God, that our relationship with God is good, so that you know, so that we can receive, you know, the same honor. You know, I really want my people to continue to be saved. Anyways, that is Romans chapter 11. All right, have a great day. Bye.